Hey everyone! Today we're diving into one of the most chaotic and fascinating periods in ancient Chinese history, the early Three Kingdoms period, from 184 CE to 190 CE. This era was like a real-life Game of Thrones, full of ruthless warlords, epic battles, and dramatic power struggles. Imagine this. The Han Dynasty, which had ruled China since 206 BCE, was falling apart. The government was weak and couldn't control the empire, leading to brutal local wars, rebellions, and uprisings. The capital would soon fall, and the Han Dynasty would be split apart by rival factions, scheming eunuchs, and stubborn Confucian scholars. With the emperor's rule in chaos, ambitious warlords like Dong Zhou, Liu Bei, and Cao Cao rose to power, each with one goal: to rule all of China. Their stories have fascinated people for centuries, especially with the famous novel, The Romance of the Three Kingdoms, written during the Ming Dynasty. This novel turned historical figures like Liu Bei, Guan Yu, and Sun Quan into legendary cultural heroes and even gods. But let's rewind a bit. The Han Dynasty had been China's most successful dynasty, but by the 2nd century, things were falling apart. The central government was controlled by a secretive inner court, dominated by court eunuchs, and was out of touch with the everyday people. Rebellions were already popping up in the 140 CE, and the emperor couldn't do much more than bribe local strongmen to keep the peace. The military, still technically loyal to the Han rulers, was stationed on the frontiers with little motivation to remain loyal to the distant emperor. The Han's decision to give commanders long-term control of their armies backfired. These commanders earned the respect and loyalty of their troops, not the emperor. Soldiers were paid directly by their commanders, strengthening their allegiance to their local leaders. Meanwhile, the common people were suffering from natural disasters like floods and earthquakes, and ongoing wars with the Shanbi people, who valued their freedom more than Chinese luxury goods. The Chinese government sent more and more military expeditions against the Shanbi, but with few gains and many losses. In 177 CE, the Chinese army was ambushed by the Shanbi in the northern steppes, with 3/4 of the men not returning. To make matters worse, corrupt officials often avoided taxes, leaving the peasantry even more impoverished. Regional governors had to raise their own revenue, and locals had to arm themselves for self-defense. Wealthy landlords created private armies from their tenants and local farmers, while others fled to the hills or relocated entire villages, fortifying themselves against the chaos. China was quickly becoming a free-for-all. And now, let's dive into one of the most dramatic events of that era, the Yellow Turban Rebellion. In the final 2 decades of the 2nd century, the simmering discontent in the provinces exploded into one of the most serious and long-lasting rebellions ever seen in China. This was the Yellow Turban Rebellion, which erupted in 184 CE and was led by the charismatic Taoist mystic Zhang Fei. The Yellow Turban cult was a popular religious movement closely associated with Taoism. They believed that illness came from sin, but good news for the medicine-starved peasants: diseases could be cured by confessing those sins. The rebels wore yellow turbans, symbolizing the earth element, which they believed could extinguish the fire element associated with their enemy, the Han Dynasty. Taoist philosophy revolves around the principles of yin-yang and the interaction of the 5 elements: earth, wood, metal, fire, and water. Above these elements was Tian, means heaven, represented by the color blue. The Han emperors had initially associated their rule with heaven, but later claimed to rule by the power of fire. The Yellow Turban rebels argued that the Han had betrayed their original earth principle. By invoking the spiritual concept of jiazi, which means worth or value, the rebels claimed their cause was more just and powerful than that of the Han. The rebellion gained popularity in the East and spread rapidly, thanks to its political turn and the promotion of aid to the poor. The movement criticized the widespread discrimination against women and the lower classes in Chinese society. Despite its leader Zhang Fei's preaching for a great peace, the cult transformed into a significant military rebellion. The Yellow Turbans were well organized into military units and launched attacks on local government offices across China. The rebellion spread like wildfire, overwhelming 16 commanderies, defeating imperial armies, kidnapping rulers, and capturing cities. The country was now divided into regions controlled by rebels, warlords, or local governors still loyal to the Han. The constant fighting and suffering of the Chinese people were captured in a poem attributed to the warlord Cao Cao. And Cao Cao, one of the Han Emperor Lingdi's top generals, eventually crushed the rebellion within a year. He organized a military coalition of private armies from important nobles and transformed them into an efficient fighting force. Zhang Ju was either killed in battle or executed, but the rebellion continued to simmer quietly in eastern Sichuan province. The damage was done, and the line between local governors and warlords blurred across China. The Han Dynasty had lost control over the provinces. And now, let's continue our story with one of the most infamous figures of this period, Cao Cao. Cao Cao began his career as a commandant and police chief in the Han capital, Luoyang, during the 170 CE. He quickly earned a reputation for being a strict enforcer of the law, unafraid to challenge the rich and powerful. Later literature and Chinese operas often portray him as a Machiavellian villain, complete with a snarling white mask and sinister eyebrows. There's even a Chinese saying, "Speak of Cao Cao when he appears," similar to the English, "Speak of the devil." But Cao Cao wasn't the only warlord to rise from the ashes of the Yellow Turban Rebellion. The rebellion had forced the emperor to back several local warlords, allowing them to raise their own armies to deal with the rebels. Once the Yellow Turbans were defeated, these armies turned on each other, plunging China into a brutal civil war. During this time, the capital at Luoyang was sacked by another warlord, Dong Zhou, from 189 to 192 CE. Dong Zhou, originally a frontier general, had a long military career, starting as a member of the elite Imperial Guard unit, the Gentlemen of the Feathered Forest. He was the kind of general who had been stationed on the frontiers for years and had developed strong loyalty among his troops. When he was recalled to court in 189 CE, he refused, stating that his soldiers needed him and wouldn't let him leave. Taking advantage of the chaos, Dong Zhou responded to a call for assistance from He Jin, the half-brother of the Empress Dowager, and moved his forces to within 70 miles of Luoyang. After He Jin was murdered in the palace, high-ranking officials and military leaders decided to take drastic action. They assassinated all 2,000 eunuchs who had been controlling the government. In their desperation, they invited Dong Zhou into the city, which had a population of around 500,000. Dong Zhou entered Luoyang with a vengeance. He burned the capital's wooden buildings to the ground, including the library and state archives, and kidnapped the young Emperor Shaodi. Zhou then withdrew to the former Han capital of Chang'an, a more defensible location surrounded by mountains. Luoyang lay in ruins, a testament to the devastation brought by Dong Zhou's forces. Dong Zhou reveled in his success, and if later sources are to be believed, he was a mad despot. The Romance of the Three Kingdoms describes him as meting out cruel punishments to captured rebels while enjoying a feast, his courtiers faint with terror as he laughed and chatted as if nothing was happening. The destruction of Luoyang was a devastating blow to the already crumbling Han government. Warlords like Cao Cao and Dong Zhou continued to battle for control of China, each wanting to manipulate the puppet emperor to legitimize their rule. The Three Kingdoms period that followed saw China completely fragmented, and it would take another 3 centuries before the country was reunified.